Good morning. We're just waiting for attendees to join, so we'll start in a few minutes. If you're joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for making the time to join this Seriti Partner Learning Workshop. Today's topic is proposal writing for nonprofits. So I will give an outline of what to expect for the day, and I see people are still joining, and I hope that this will be beneficial to you in terms of writing your proposals and getting support for your projects. So what you can expect from today is that we'll go through various components of a proposal. There will be an opportunity to answer some poll questions about a third of the way through. And then also we have some practical examples for the different aspects that one finds in a proposal. So firstly, why is it important? So proposal writing is critical for securing support for your projects and programs. And for that support, it could be in kind, but one of the most helpful ways to support a project or program is funding and financial support. And it also, the proposal itself, one of the things that is an objective of a proposal is to demonstrate an organization's capacity and expertise to do the work that it's proposing to do. And it should outline clear objectives, plans, and expected outcomes of the project that you're proposing to a funder. So today we're going to look at the different components that you can find in a proposal. We will learn a little bit about M&E and indicators and theory of change. These things we'll pick up next week in a little bit more detail in terms of the kinds of indicators you may want to consider in your proposal. But for today, we'll also look at funding opportunities and how to prepare your organizational documents. We want to look at how to align costs with the activities and indicators that you propose. Look at the different kinds of formats that you can get for a proposal. And by that, I mean whether it's an email, a short expression of interest, or a full proposal. And I'm also going to give some tips on what I've found to be effective for proposal writing. So just as a background to this workshop, as many of you are from organizations that already have projects and programs, and you would be seeking to support your ongoing work, one should keep in mind that a part of the proposal might be to showcase your existing work. So you would have some reports and assessment of the impact you've achieved. Here you would want to clearly articulate what your goals are as an organization, where your passion lies, and what problem you seek to solve. And you would always want to look at clear ways that you are measuring your success, because that creates confidence that the work that you're already doing is achieving some outcomes and impact for the communities you serve. You could think about qualitative and quantitative information. And you want to showcase the success stories, the milestones that you've achieved to enable you to secure more funding for the work you're already doing. There would be another case for writing a proposal that is addressing a new problem and for new work, but that would cover the same material. So what is the purpose of a proposal? So it is a written document that outlines your plan or idea. These days, the word that's often used is a solution. So funders out there know the problems and they're seeking solutions to these problems that they wish to put their support behind. As I mentioned, we can have different types of proposals. So concept notes are generally a brief overview of an idea that you are proposing to do, an idea of a solution. Funders may issue a call for expression of interest. These are quite tricky because you often have very limited space to indicate what you will do. And also there can be constraints on the amount of information you can give in terms of how you'll actually run the project and what it will cost. So there you want to focus on the strength of your solution that you're proposing and demonstrate that you understand the problem that you wish to solve. A full proposal is going to cover all the aspects we're looking at today, and it includes a project plan and budget. So I'd encourage you to invest time in writing compelling proposals. Don't leave it to last minute because our creativity doesn't always come out of the tap when we want it to. So if we plan and have time in advance, maybe a few weeks to a month before an opportunity, and we start putting together the aspects of our proposal. We want to be sure that we understand who we're applying for funding from. So look at donors' websites, look at their sustainability reports, find out about them. And we know with any relationship or friendship, people like it when you've taken an interest in them and an effort to learn more about them. We don't like it when people are all about themselves. And so in a proposal, we don't want to be focused all on our organization and what we are doing. We should also acknowledge that we've taken time to look into the funder or foundation or company's priorities. What are they seeking to achieve with the resources they want to invest in social impact? So they would be tailored to their requirements. Now we're going to look at some of the next few slides. We're going to go through different aspects of a proposal. So an executive summary is something that you would do at the end of completing your proposal. And there you want to highlight in half a sentence to one sentence each different component. So here would really be a high-level summary of what you're proposing. If any of you in attendance are familiar with research, this is similar to an abstract in a research paper. It gives a person an idea of the overview of the whole proposal before they go into reading it in more detail. We do want to tell a potential funder a little bit about ourselves, perhaps when we were registered, how long we've been operating, and what kind of skills and experience we have, as well as what our main goal is, our mission. Now comes time to a problem statement. So here you want to demonstrate that you are aware of a problem and you have done some investigations or research, and you have some data or evidence to support that this problem exists. Many funders and companies with their CSI or foundations are aware of the problems that we have in the world today with unemployment, with health challenges, or educational things that need to be addressed. So one doesn't need to spend too much time on stating the problem. We want to put it across clearly that we understand what the problem is and cite some reputable and credible sources, perhaps. These could be something like Statistics South Africa or an international organization like the United Nations, which may have a report on a topic, and you just want to mention that you have looked at what other people think, that you haven't just come up with this problem yourself and not consulted any kind of wisdom from other people that may have spent a lot of hours really unpacking the problem. Additional aspects of a proposal. Now comes the exciting part. You want to put across your solution that you are proposing to address the problem you highlighted. And this is an opportunity for you to stand out among other applicants. So you're presenting your project and you're telling a potential funder why it's important, why it's going to work, why it's different, why it's new, why it's innovative. And in unpacking your solution, you also want to be realistic and show that you've really also thought about what you want to do. It's not just a desire of your heart, but you've applied your mind and you've thought through the problem. So you would include activities and different strategies and perhaps what are the outcomes you wish to achieve. You'd also include an implementation plan or methodology. How are you going to go about this work? What are the timeframes that you are dividing the project into? What are the stages, the resources used, responsibilities? Do you have partners on this project? What are their responsibilities? Where will this work take place, etc.? Then we can put a really high-level monitoring and evaluation plan in for a potential donor, that you're also looking at accountability for yourself, and you are going to be measuring how successful you are in terms of using these funds to implement the solution you've proposed. And then you obviously have to have a budget that's transparent and that aligns with the work, with items that are costed per phase of the project or activity, or the inputs and various things that need to be funded so the project could happen. This could include consumable items. Perhaps if you are working in an agriculture project, it might be seeds. If you're working on training or education, it could be workshops. So the point is to have an itemized budget. So just what is M&E at a high level? So the M and E, they stand for monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring is something that happens through the whole life span of a project, and it's the weekly or monthly checking in and looking at what's happening and collecting that information. Evaluation happens at various stages in a project, perhaps halfway through or at the end, to check what actually was achieved and what's been changing in the surrounding context, whether these funds that you seek to use to drive social impact are actually achieving the goals that you initially laid out. Why is it important? Why would we have M&E at the proposal stage of seeking funding? Well, it demonstrates that you are willing to be accountable for the funds that you seek. You've already given thought to the problem and how you're going to address it. You've thought about challenges and risks, and you also seek to track your progress that you make. We have different kinds of indicators. So indicators on M&E are things that you can measure. For example, how many workshops you did in a project. You could have indicators for different aspects of the stages of a project. So you could have an indicator for input, say the number of seeds. You could have output. You could have one for outcomes and impact. So this will become clearer a bit later when we look at theory of change. A very popular way to look at indicators is to think about them as so-called SMART indicators. So something that's specific, you can measure, it's also achievable, it's relevant, and it's time-bound. Here are some examples of indicators. So number of beneficiaries reached, that's an output indicator. It's something that you've done, but it doesn't necessarily have a qualitative value to it. It's got a quantitative value. Percentage increase in knowledge or skills. So that's more like something that's happened since doing a training workshop. So it's an outcome indicator. Reduction in poverty levels. So that sounds like something that happened indirectly because of what you were doing on your project. Say you were trying to address youth unemployment. Then we could say later on, after having run the project for several months, there could have been an observed reduction in poverty in an area where youth now have more opportunities. Say we're working in health, then we might look at improved health outcomes, and that would be an outcome indicator. Okay, at this stage, there's an opportunity for us to interact a little bit. So let's do some polls. So our first question, what aspects of proposal writing do you find most challenging? So this is what we've covered so far. Is it the problem statement you find difficult? Is it the project solution? We can go ahead and answer that question. We're also going to look at question 2. Where do you find yourself spending more time? So as I said, we can look at the problem in great detail, or we can look at the solution. So that question, where do you find yourself spending more time while you are writing a proposal? Are you looking at the problem, or are you spending time proposing your solution? Then the third question, what would you say your organization's success rate is in securing grants from proposals? Is it less than 10%, 10 to 25%, 26 to 75%? Is it even more than 75%? Are you very effective in hitting your target? Going to allow a few minutes just for everyone to vote. We are at 70% participation. If we can just get a few more votes in. 14 people have voted. If the remaining 6 could please select your answers to the questions. Okay, I think we did well. 73% of, oh wow, no, it's going up. We've got 78% of attendees have participated. Well done. Here are the results. So when looking at proposal writing, what do you find most challenging? Designing an effective M&E plan, aligning the proposal with funder priorities. I would agree, those are often the most challenging sections. With question 2, I'm delighted to see that most spend more time on the solution. That's very important. As I mentioned, funders and donors are already aware of the problems out there, and we should spend more time on proposing our solution and why it is different and why it's going to work. And I'm very impressed to see that so many of you are very successful in your hit rate. So from what I found out by doing a little bit of searching on the internet for different people's opinions on this, if you are around 40%, you should tap yourself on the back. You are doing well. That is considered a good rate from what I was able to find. So thank you very much for those of you. And these are very interesting indicators of where we sit today on this topic. Let's look at some practical examples. So here's an example of a problem statement. In a community in Johannesburg, 60% of youth are unemployed, compared to a national rate of 34%. This high unemployment rate contributes to increased poverty, crime, social instability in the community. Local surveys indicate that 75% of unemployed youth lack the necessary skills and expertise to secure stable employment in the current job market. So this problem statement is fine, except for it has a flaw. So here, at the end of this sentence, this high unemployment rate contributes to increased poverty, crime, and instability in the community. We could have considered putting a reference because it improves the credibility of what we are saying. Because otherwise, that could be seen as just an opinion. But we could think of seeing whether there is a report from government on this topic, or there perhaps could be academic research papers that have looked at the link between unemployment and other social issues. And all that would be necessary there is just to put a citation or even a link to the website where you found that information or that agrees with that sentiment. The second sentence could also benefit from a citation. So local surveys indicate that 75% of unemployed youth lack the necessary skills and experience to secure stable employment in the current job market. So there's an assumption there that if youth receive these skills and experience, then the jobs will be available. So we could also strengthen this problem statement by citing some work or reporting that someone else has done. Perhaps the United Nations has looked at the link between skills and experience and jobs, or the International Labour Organization may have some sort of statistic about that statement. Here is an example of a smart indicator for our project. So just to let you know, the examples for today will all be related to this problem statement. So we could think of a smart indicator as being, by the end of 12-month training program, 80% of 100 participating youth will have secured formal employment or started their businesses, as verified through employment contracts or business registration documents. So my question would be, is this a smart indicator? It's certainly specific. It can be measured. It is time-bound. But is it achievable? 80%. That's quite an ambitious target. And is it realistic? So there, we might consult success that other organizations or programs have had in creating jobs through training and come up with a more realistic target. Here is an example of a monitoring and evaluation plan. So our project that we are proposing because of this community where there is a high youth unemployment, we're going to call it Skills for Success program. And it's about reducing unemployment. So some key indicators could be the number of youth. These are output indicators. So things that you've done in the project. So the number of youth completing skills training, very easy to measure. You have a target, you want to reach 100 youth to go through your program over 12 months. How do you measure it? An attendance register or a completion certificate. How often could you do this? You could do it perhaps monthly. Now we have our outcome indicators. So because we were doing these activities, what happened as a result? So this could be the percentage of program graduates employed or self-employed. So we might want to include a few months after the 12 months to check up on the youth that went through our program. Now we had this very ambitious target of 80% will find employment or become self-employed within 3 months of completing the program. What is the form of verification? It would be employment forms or some sort of registration documents. But now we could run into a problem because someone has been through our program, but things like my employment contract or my business documents, I might consider those quite personal or private. And I've been through your program, but why should I share my employment contract with you afterwards? So there's workarounds. Perhaps you just get a letter from the employer that gives evidence that, okay, now I as a youth got an opportunity. And when could you do this? You could do it quarterly, perhaps. So as we're expecting 3 months after the project ends, then we're looking at the outcomes in a 3-month period, so quarterly. An impact indicator. So now this is something that you're going to have to look at after you've run your project. Was there a reduction in that unemployment rate? Did the 60% go down? Can we target, we might want to have a target that's very ambitious as well, 5% reduction in the unemployment rate over 12 months. What could we look at? Local government employment statistics. That could be hard because often such statistics are by industry or by a much larger geographic area. So something more realistic would perhaps be to run another community survey. And you might want to do that annually. Here's some more examples of the practical examples for our Skills for Success program. So we could do pre and post training skills assessment to figure out, was there an increase in skills and knowledge? We could do participant surveys and interviews. We could ask their future employers to give feedback, and we could do surveys in the community. So those are all ways we could collect information or data about the running of our project. Reporting, we could look at doing monthly internal reports, quarterly reports to funders, and an annual impact report. On the evaluation side, remember, we do evaluation after we've already done some work for a little bit of time. Then we want to see how effective it has been, say, after 6 months or after 12 months. Okay, I hope that's been helpful to think about the topics that we've looked at already with some practical examples. We're going to look now at what's a theory of change. So theory of change is a logical sequence of activities and outcomes. It explains how the project will achieve its desired impact in a step-by-step approach. It identifies what the long-term goal is, or what we call impact. So that's not something we've directly achieved, but it changed as a result of what we did. It maps out some preconditions or outcomes required in order to achieve that impact. So say the impact is reduction in unemployment, then the outcome is we need more people employed. Defines the interventions and activities to achieve each outcome. So for that outcome of employment, back to our example, for youth, we want to ensure that they have the requisite skills and savvy to find themselves in a better place in the job market. And we want to have some underlying assumptions. So some assumptions might be that such opportunities exist, or that skills training is an effective way to improve someone's ability to find a job. It's an assumption because we're assuming that what is lacking in the economy is skills, but perhaps we've misunderstood the problem, and maybe what's lacking is an actual opportunity for a job or an opportunity to work. Perhaps the times are difficult and companies are not hiring. And there could be another reason behind unemployment, for example. Why is it so important for this to be well defined? Well, we want to show that we've thought about everything in a rational way, that it's logical, that there's value for each rand spent, that there's value for each dollar spent, that we're not doing things that are not necessary to achieving the goal. Everything that we propose in our project is important and needed. And if we're successful in our application, our proposal, then the fact that we've thought about it and put together a theory of change for the project, it's going to now help with the inception of the project and the implementation plan being developed in more detail. So using our example, this is a very simple kind of theory of change. So all the sections that are in full caps, if, then, which will lead to, resulting in, those you can keep. And you can change the text to your own context or situation. Bear in mind, this is very simple and it's meant to be an example. So if we provide comprehensive skills training and mentorship to unemployed youth, then they will gain marketable skills and professional networks, which will lead to increased employment opportunities and entrepreneurship, resulting in reduced unemployment and improved economic stability in the community. So as I said, there are assumptions that come with this theory of change. We're assuming that businesses locally are willing to hire newly trained youth. We're assuming that the skills that we teach on our workshops align with what the market wants. And we're assuming that youth remain committed to completing the program over the 12 months. So I hope that that has been helpful. I just want to check if there are any questions. Please feel free to use the Q&A to post any questions that you have so far. You can also put them in the chat. My colleague will be looking at that to see if there are any thoughts so far. Oh, that's a good question from CPC Claire. How can we highlight new strategies that emerged from past M&E results in a new proposal? So they say that it's always good to be honest. And we want to highlight successes as much as what has been challenging. So if we're talking of an existing project and we are showcasing our M&E, we could consider putting in a new proposal what has worked, but also being open about what hasn't worked and then the strategies that you've since implemented to correct what you found to not be working. So that speaks to the heart of monitoring and evaluation, that one of its purposes is to help us actually implement the project and learn while we are doing the work we're doing. So that actually showcases that you've got an effective M&E, you picked up a problem, you devised new strategies, and you are now running them. And you can say that because of these changes, we expect to do better. What tone should we use in a proposal? Formal or conversational? That's a tricky one. Um, I wouldn't say conversational. That could come across as perhaps not professional because you you haven't established a relationship yet with the donor or foundation. Going forward, after you've been working with an organization or funder, you can, of course, be more conversational in your communications between each other. But I think as a first step, one would avoid a conversational tone. But equally, I think the world has changed and formal is outdated. So I would go for a more media tone. I have my personal preference is for the tone that you might find in a newspaper or a magazine, which is very neutral, that uses fresh, modern, easy to understand language that everyone knows. I would avoid jargon, and if you have to use jargon, explain what you mean, especially your own terms that you may have for things on your projects, catchphrases or things that you've come up with to describe the work you do. It's always good just to unpack in a little detail what you mean by your term that you're using, and then as you move forward, you can continue to use that term. Thank you for the commendation. Nazipo is enjoying the presentation and finding it helpful. I'm glad to hear that. Is it possible we can get a more detailed proposal in Word template that can play around depending on different project objectives? Yes, that's possible. I'll speak to Sandy, our program manager for Seriti Partner, about us organizing a very simple, basic Word template that can be shared. Have you had experience using AI in creating proposals? Yes, so actually, interestingly enough, some donors and funders and competitions and things are actually encouraging the use of AI. So what they do is they encourage you to write your content first by yourself, but because they want a very brief, short, succinct proposal, and it may be an online form that limits the number of words or characters you can use, what they recommend is to put your content that you've developed into an AI that you're familiar with and say, reduce this to 500 words exactly, or reduce this sentence to 100 words, keeping all necessary content or not changing any substance of the content. So there you're using AI as an administrative assistant just to help you to be more concise in your language and wording, because increasingly donors want to be able to sift through perhaps hundreds of applications, and they don't have time to read very long stories. So they put the application online, and they force you to, by having a word limit, to limit your answers. You can also use AI as a sounding board. So it is there as a digital mind. Ask it questions, but understand its limitations. Most of them are not familiar with up-to-date information. The nature of an AI is that it is trained over a period of time, and its information or what it knows is dated. So when its training ended, say it was trained from January 2022 to September 2023, then anything that occurred after September 2023, it will not be aware of. And it will also not be aware of information that its creators didn't think was important. So understand AI's limitations, understand that currently they are not connected to real-time current events, and they also, in many cases, no longer learn. So once they have finished being trained, their learning abilities are switched off, and they adapt to you as a user. If you create a profile on one of these websites or platforms, they get to understand what language you use, and they understand your style, and they adjust to the user, but they don't update for current information. So there again, I would just encourage you. You are all human beings. I believe humans are better than technology. We have an incredible ability to be inventive, to demonstrate creativity. We also have bodies and we feel. So that gives us an insight that no machine or digital mind can understand. The work we do in the non-profit space is about benefiting human lives, and it's about the real challenges that people face. And only we as human beings can truly understand what it's like to feel pain or to feel happiness. So use technology, but always remember that you are set apart from it, and you have something that no machine can ever have. Which is the best way to include risk management plan during a proposal stage? You can put it toward the end, after you've outlined your methodology, how you're going to do it, time frames, and then the end, you're just acknowledging what the risks are and that you've thought about it. Qualitative and quantitative information both have their place. And I believe that the best is a combination of both. So you want some numbers, but then you also want some qualities. So the qualitative helps give meaning to the quantitative. It gives it a more relevant dimension of meaning. So for example, we had training workshops. That's a quantitative measure, but the qualitative measure might be the feedback received on an evaluation form from someone about how it impacted them, how it benefited them, how their minds were changed, or how it improved their situation. So that helps us understand the effectiveness of the number of things we were doing. Okay, we'll get on to how to align with funder priorities. So thank you very much for all those lovely questions, and let's move on with the presentation, and I'll speak to donors toward the end. So I think we're getting to the bottom of why it's so important to have stories and the human dimension to our work. So as we're going about implementing a project, it's always good to have success stories from participating community members um, and other beneficiaries, because when we seek additional funding or we want to tell our story in the future, then we've got that information and it's great to share. Everyone likes good news. So we can use stories in newsletters, and we can use it as part of our communications within the sector, and also just educating the general public about what we're doing. And then importantly, we want to think of multimedia content like videos or even podcasts. This depends on the nature of your work. It doesn't have to be complicated. A new thing I've discovered, which I think is really cool, is called a photo essay. So one way that we could present what we've done is in a series of photos with captions. That could be very useful for marketing purposes or to tell a story to a broader audience, because it may people don't necessarily have the time to read a lot. We live in a time of lots of information, and pictures are very easy to understand, and also it's more enjoyable. So consider videos, consider pictures, and keep up to date with some of the creative things that people are doing to tell stories. And these can be done very simply. You can do a photo essay in Word. You could do a photo essay in PowerPoint. So it doesn't need to require extra resources. Podcasts might have their place in telling impact stories. After some time of running a project for several years, you may consider having some kind of event or regular installment on a platform, say about beneficiary experiences or what's happened in the long term with someone receiving support. Um, Also, things like what we're doing today with having a webinar on Zoom. This is an example of using media as a way to tell a story. And we are telling the story of writing proposals. What would be a scale-up plan? So now again, we're talking about existing projects and programs that we're doing. So we may have now achieved proof of concept. We've done the project. We've maybe had a few locations where we're running it. We've achieved the expectations. Now we want to inform the existing donor or a new donor. We're ready to enter growth stage. So our solution is ready to scale. It's ready to move to more communities. It's ready to move to more provinces. Perhaps it's even ready to move to another country. So here we're going to unpack our plans for how we're going to initiate scale up. Again, coming back, thinking about the indicators. We want to be realistic and achievable, and the other aspects of a smart indicator. Timelines, budgets, how much time is it going to take to grow the project? How much more funding do we need? We ran the project for 12 months, but now to scale, we want 18 months funding, or we want 48 months funding to to achieve the impact on a bigger scale. And again, we just want to reiterate why the organization is interested in this work. What's its passion? So among us and in the sector, all of us have different passions and interests. Some organizations are passionate about employment and resolving the issues surrounding that. Others may want improved access to community healthcare. Others may be focused on education. Others may be looking at social justice issues, whether people's rights, as outlined in the Constitution, are being realized. So all of us can have different organization, mission, and goals, and we just want to be clear about, always be clear about why this work is important to you as an organization, because that gives credibility to you doing the work. It's helpful to include charts, infographics. Remember that if you're using someone else's chart or infographic, it's just polite to credit it and say where you got it from. I would also encourage you to use smart art in Word and in PowerPoint. Sometimes if we've got a section that could be bulleted, we might think of putting it rather as a diagram or a smart art a picture, because it's just more appealing and it breaks the eye. If there's a lot of text and someone's reading, it's nice to have those visual aspects to give the eye a break and maintain the reader's interest. Where can we look for funding opportunities? So we can look in a variety of places. So we want to be aware. So a part of knowing what you are about, so part of understanding one's own mission and goals, is understanding who out there agrees with you, who has got the same passions. So it's about a lot of looking around, a lot of Googling, a lot of searching, finding the organizations like government agencies or foundations that share your vision, that are worried about the same problems and think that those problems are the problems that need solutions so that we can make real change in society. And once you find them, it's not really going to change, because if you think of yourselves, your mission and vision doesn't change every other day. So once you've found a foundation, you follow them and you keep them on your radar, because you know that they align to you. And so you will be aware of when they have an opportunity, when they advertise new developments or they have calls. So the time isn't wasted in finding them, because once you find them, they fall within your circle of the people that you know about that are worried about the same things. There's a few online directories that are also helpful. Funds for NGOs, it has a free it's an option of a free version or a paid for version. I wouldn't say that if you go for the free version, you can't get any functionality out of it. So a big thing would be that often if you find an opportunity on the free version, it may not give you the full write-up about what it's about. But I've got a simple workaround for that. Simply Google what they were talking about in the short half conversation about the opportunity, and then you will find the opportunity on the actual foundation or organization's website. So it's not necessary to have the paid for version unless you want access to the resources that they have there, or you want access to the search engine part of it, which allows you to put in your criteria and then search and find opportunities. There's also DevX. It's not one I use anymore, but my experience with it was that it didn't necessarily update as frequently as I would have liked. Another way is that we can do networking events and conferences. There we can meet other people, like-minded people, and through these networks, we can establish partnerships where we're working toward the same goals, or we can find people that want to support the work we do. Also companies. So companies have their own priorities. It's often linked to their actual business activity. So if organizations are in finance, they may be interested in education, because down the line, they might want to see a country that has more clients for them, that will bank and have jobs, and that will bring them business down the line. If you're thinking of manufacturing, they might be interested in specific skills that they want people to have, which is going to help industry grow, and it's going to help ultimately the economy developing further. So it's always important to understand what a company does, what's their actual business, because that will help you to understand what they might be interested in supporting. Tips that you can use to identify funding sources. So being aware of their priorities and focus areas. Once we found one, say we found donor X, and we understand that they are all about climate action. They want to see a world where communities are mobilized to speak to their governments and their officials to get policy action in place, to provide clean air, and to move toward renewable energy so that we save the planet. So that could be their goal or their mission. Now we would want to download or look on their website, what are the eligibility criteria? Who are they funding? For this, there could be different kinds of intended organizations in view. So the funder may want to fund for-profit entities. So with renewable energy, they might be thinking of funding a small enterprise that has a solution, and they want to see it being proven in the market. So non-profits might not be eligible for that opportunity, but you could have the same donor that you've identified that has this same interest in climate action, but no, they're interested in non-profits. They want to see communities take action. They want to see civic voices. They want to see political action happening. So everyone has their own priorities, they have their own focus areas, and then they have the people that they intend to fund. And that's got to do with the kind of solutions they're looking for. Some might be looking for social solutions, they might be looking for campaigns or things that are going to improve people's human rights. And others might be looking for more economic or market-related things. They want to see technology being used. They want to see that down the line, this can become a business and that it's going to create jobs or other opportunities. So you can see that understanding who you're applying to is very important. Another tip is subscribe to newsletters. Once you've found your organization that aligns with your goals and what you value, and you see that you are eligible, that in the past they've funded organizations, say in South Africa, or so your region is eligible, uh, the way you're registered in the country, your legal registration, you're eligible. You've been operational for this number of years, you're eligible. So once you know that we align and we're eligible, then we subscribe to their newsletter, because we don't want to fill up our inbox with things that are not important. But it's good to make sure that if there's somebody out there that can support you, then you want to hear their news alerts as soon as they happen. We can also leverage our existing partnerships and connections to grow our network. So we know that if you've ever heard of something called degrees of separation, we are only actually a few contacts away from everyone in the world. People say it's something like 6 or 7 people, that the number of different connections to meet someone else, to meet the president, to meet the CSI manager of a big company. So networking and forming new connections is very important. Organizational documentation. So at this point in the presentation, we're going to move to some background things that you should have on your to-do list, that you should have on your agenda if you haven't already got these in place. So there's the day-to-day work of writing proposals and seeking funding, but there's an administrative background to this work, and it assumes that you have all the supporting documents that you need to have for due diligence when a funder likes your idea or solution, but now they want to just check that you are legal and you're compliant and you pay your taxes and you are not guilty of fraud or corruption, all those kind of things. So these are the kind of things that are going to help you. So you need to have your organizational documentation in place, perhaps the roles and responsibilities, the delegation matrix, who in the organization has signing power, a constitution or a board charter. Some specific things that we might have are our annual financial statements, the results of our bookkeeping, depending on the size of our organization. We also want our registration certificates available. So your registration certificate that you might have with the Department of Social Development, or your incorporation certificate that you would have from the Commission for Intellectual Property in Companies, CIPC. If you are a nonprofit, you may also be a public benefit organization, depending on whether you've registered for that with SARS. So that enables you to receive donations and issue certain documentation to a donor so that they can reduce their tax burden. And that would be some proof that you are a public benefit organization from SARS. Again, speaking of governance documents, I spoke of a board charter. You could also have organizational bylaws. We could also term that policies and procedures, some kind of document that outlines ethical conduct. This is very important in the context of, does your organization have a position on environmental sustainability? If you're doing project, what happens with the waste? Do you just put it anywhere, or you're responsible? It's particularly important with certain things. If we're using chemicals or batteries, want to dispose of those things in a responsible way. It also speaks to important social matters. So are there policies around issues of sexual harassment? Are there policies around um, ethical and professional conduct within an organization? And that's really important because if, by extension, if a donor has supported your organization and they, of course, have those kind of policies in place and they are sensitive to these important social um, rights, human rights issues, by extension, they want to ensure that anyone they support stands on those same principles, supports human dignity, supports human rights, and understands the importance of human well-being. Because if something were to happen that violates those principles, and there was not any kind of documentation or process for handling that, that is bad for a funder's public image. It's bad for their brand. So all these things, they're helpful to have in place so that when you get asked for them, they're ready and you can give them to a potential funder, foundation, company, donor. Another very important thing is your financial statements, just proof that everything is above board, that everything is managed and it's been, especially if it's audited independently, that's beneficial. Annual reports, we should take time to look at the organization across all its various activities. So what's happened across all the different projects and initiatives we run. Also, what's happened in terms of employment, staff. Have staff received training? Have we invested in capacity building within our organization? These are the kind of things that you could include in an annual report. It's also not only about your projects and initiatives, but about your organization and its story and its journey in this sector and in achieving its mission. And you have your project reports, to be more specific. So you have an annual report for your individual projects, and you're able to share that to give a donor, a company, information about what you've already done. Bear in mind, these documents may not be necessary when you first submit your application. Some of them might be, especially your legal registration documents, but others may only come along later, and you will get a request for these other kind of supporting documents. I would say that when it comes to looking for funding from international organizations, some of the documents required become more numerous, and one can understand that because we are in different countries, there's a need for a recipient of funds to provide more information so that the donor can feel secure, and they may not be able to travel to South Africa to visit your organization in person, but we've given them all our information and company documentation, and that creates credibility. It's transparent, and it builds trust. Okay, now we're going on to a few more practical elements. So, aligning costs to activities and indicators. So we're talking about the budget now, very important part of a proposal. It's also a part of the proposal that probably most needs input from your team. If you have a dedicated proposal writer in the organization, this is a section that definitely needs to be run past the finance division within your organization and also the project team, because they are aware of the changing costs and the changing realities of actually implementing the project. And they would be able to tell you, is this budget realistic? Can I achieve what I have proposed with the funds that I'm requesting and the way I've broken it down? We want to be accurate and realistic in our estimations of costs. We want to demonstrate that we've really thought of the stages of the project and where is the project front loaded, or is it more equitably spread? Is there more funding required toward the end of the project? So we've really thought about it logically. We've thought about when we will do certain activities, and we've thought about how much each of these stages or parts of the project will cost. All of this improves accountability and transparency. It's not like you just thumbsuck the numbers and you want X amount of money, but there's no sort of breakdown or logic to how you're going to spend the money. So it's very important to show that you've given it thought and that it matches the rest of your proposal that you've done. So here's an example. So back to our example of youth unemployment. So we want to demonstrate how each budget directly supports the activity and contributes to achieving the indicated target. So this is related to one little thing within our Skills for Success project, that we're going to have a training workshop. So we could consider venue rental. These are just example figures. So we say that's going to cost 25,000. Sounds like a very expensive venue. And then we say we need to charge facilitator fees for the 5 days. Then we get 12,500. We want to train 50 participants. So basically, remember, we had a target of 100 youth. So it sounds like we're doing 2 workshops, and we're going to have 50 in the first workshop. And the training materials are going to be 200 per manual. And so that works out 10,000. We need to refresh our learners and youth during the day, because we're doing a full day training, and people need to have a break and they need to have refreshments. So because the sessions are lasting perhaps longer than 4 or 5 hours, and we certainly can't concentrate for that long. So these are kind of items that you should have, you should think about having in a workshop, and also think about how you're going to justify it if a donor comes back and says, why should I be paying for food or lunch or refreshments? So there you get a cost for that. Now, for our youth participants, they're unemployed, remember, and the community where they live has very scarce opportunities, and we already know that there are social challenges in that area. So people realistically can't afford to get to the workshop themselves. So we want to give a transportation stipend and for each of the participants and the days that they need to attend the workshop, and then you get a total cost for what this workshop is going to cost. And now an indicator on this will be the number of people completing the entrepreneurship workshop. So you may be surprised, with all the support and opportunity, you may find that some of the 50 people decide after 3 days that, no, I'm not going to go to Thursday or Friday session. I'm a bit bored of it. So unfortunately now your participation rate has decreased, and it will only be the number of people that attended all 5 days of the training at the end of the week that will be your indicator. So the people that successfully completed the whole workshop. We would love it if it was 50, if all 50 were able to complete the workshop. But many things happen. People have emergencies that are unexpected. As I said, people may lose interest, and they may simply decide, or this is not for me. I didn't anticipate this, and I don't think it's going to help me. So I'm not going to go to the workshop anymore. And unfortunately, those are things beyond your control, and it's going to affect your how successful you are in terms of your indicators. Now we're going to look at aligning costs and activities. So let's think of some tips for developing a comprehensive, realistic budget. As I said before, itemize, itemize, itemize. If you have the opportunity to provide detail, provide detail. And you could separate it by phases of the project and then all the items that fall under that time frame. Or we could look at it differently. We could look at it by the kind of activity done. And then that could happen. You could duplicate that line item in different time periods of the project. So there's different ways of doing a budget. We want to think of the direct costs. So direct costs are the costs that are absolutely necessary to achieving the goal of the project. Now, in the previous example that we used of the workshop, those are direct costs. They are the costs necessary to produce the outcome of youth having received an entrepreneurship workshop. So all those costs fall under direct. They're needed for the project. Indirect costs are costs related to an organization just being operational. These could be things like our license subscriptions to a software that we need for ensuring a good project management of a project. Our financial management systems, our systems like Microsoft Suite. They could be our personnel costs in terms of not necessarily staff directly employed on the project, because that would fall under direct, but perhaps admin staff and other support staff doing other organizational functions that are required for good professional operations and compliance, etc. Those fall under an indirect category. Also our equipment, our laptops, tables, electricity, our telephone, paper, printing, all those kind of things. Printing could be a little bit different if there's printing costs specific to a project deliverable, then that falls under direct. So we have to think about the kinds of costs that we have, and we have to look at what a donor's rules are. So they may have different rules. Some may say you can't have more than 25% of the total budget going to staff costs. Others may say that they will not cover more than 30% of indirect costs, while others might want the majority of funds spent directly in pursuit of the project. So what I've noticed is that increasingly donors and funders want more money spent on the ultimate beneficiaries and the project delivery. So it can be challenging to cover the costs of your regular operations. And that speaks to the importance of having an efficient organizational set of processes and ways of conducting business that reduce your costs. You don't want to be wasteful, because funding to fund just your organizational aspects is scarce. Donors want to see the money end up where they want it to go, in solving the problem that they care about. We want to think of separating monitoring and evaluation out as a separate item. And this also, you'll find, has a category that donors may put in the criteria. Perhaps they want a dedicated 3% to monitoring and evaluation, because from their experience, they've invested in other social impact projects. There wasn't a dedicated line item to monitoring and evaluation. And at the end of the day, the work was done, but there's no reports to show, there's no evidence to speak of. So we know from the stories and the anecdotal information and the evaluations that may have been done, yes, people enjoyed what was done and they thought it benefited the community, but there's no real tangible thing that's going to last for the next 5 years that says that this work was done and it was money well spent. So that's why they may have a specific, and very fortunately, I think the donor landscape is recognizing the importance of M&E and increasingly willing to fund it within around 5%, 3 to 5% of the budget. That, depending on the nature of the work as well, we also have to be wise to that. Does it require a lot of monitoring? Does it require a lot of regular checking in? Then it will be a higher cost on running the project. There's also certain things you can consider in terms of contingencies, especially if you're dealing with an opportunity that's in a different currency. You may want to include a contingency line item for exchange rate fluctuations. We know exchange rates go up and down depending often on things just happening in the news or related to other societal developments, and then the exchange rate changes. So that could really disadvantage an applicant or advantage them, depending on which way the exchange rate goes. And so we could consider putting a contingency there. We could also put a contingency in for sort of acts of God, weather catastrophes, other things that take place, depending on the nature of the work that we're doing. Everything that we put in the budget, we want to be able to justify. And when there's follow-up questions, it shouldn't be a hard thing to just write back on an email. Yeah, this line item speaks to this, and this is why we need this money. Okay, types are getting back to proposals. So a big part is the expression of interest. That's very popular these days. It's a way that donors use to reduce the number of large applications they receive. So they issue an expression of interest. You fill in that. It gives you very limited scope to say how you will do the project and over what kind of period. It often doesn't allow you really to speak to your methodology or budget. It allows you an opportunity to state whether you understand the problem as they do, and then it gives you an opportunity to present your innovative solution to the problem. And then you can see that this process would then after that be closed. So with shortlisted candidates, those organizations would be contacted to submit perhaps a more detailed concept note, or they may be requested to submit a full proposal. But that way, donors are limiting the number of long applications they receive, because an expression of interest, for example, might also have very tight word limits. Your problem statement might be limited to 100 words. Your solution may be limited to 250 to 500 words. And then again, just information about your organization, you might have to say that in as little as 100 words. So it comes back to the role of AI and how that can help us in today's world. If we're having trouble with being too wordy or reducing our language, we could consider putting our content into an AI and asking it for a suggestion on shortening it while retaining the aspects that are most important. Inquiry emails. These are like standing at in front of a dartboard, and you are throwing darts constantly, and you're sometimes hitting the wall and the darts fly off. Other times you are hitting the outer circle and you get no points. Other times you're falling into getting just only the number that's allocated to that little slice of the pie. Then if you were closer, you get double, and if you hit the center, you get the bullseye. So this is really difficult to track success on. It requires a lot of effort, and sending those emails out constantly and being very thick-skinned, because you may get no responses, or you may get declines, or you may get something that is sort of sitting on the fence, where the person says, I'll forward it to my manager or the person responsible, and you never hear back. So it's worth a shot, especially if there was some human interaction first. Say you met a person at a workshop, or you were on a learning webinar together. Now you have an opener, and you can begin human contact with someone, and you say, wow, I liked your presentation, or I really enjoyed meeting you, and I want to talk to you about this. Then you've now developed a little bit of a relationship, and it's easier to open that conversation. But if you don't know the person at all, or maybe you're even emailing, the only email you can find is an info at, or a CSI at, or inquiries at, then it can be quite, one shouldn't necessarily be too hopeful that you'll get a response in any kind of short period of time. Concept notes. So this is another type of proposal, and as I've said, it's just a shorter version of a proposal. The detail on the budget might be a little bit less. You might just have the summarized line items, but not all the subcategories. You may have a much simpler implementation plan, but you still want to put some effort into your solution and make it stand out. In a concept note, try to talk less about your organization, rather just attach your full company profile along with your concept note. If they're interested in learning more about what you do, then they can read your company profile. But don't spend too much time talking about yourself, because you've got maybe only 5 pages, and maybe they've specified font size and line spacing and everything. So it might be it's very important to follow those instructions, because you don't want to spend all that time and then get disqualified on some finer detail that they consider that you cheated. So follow the rules that they give. If they have a template, use their template, and concentrate on being stand out, and telling why your solution should be shortlisted. Full proposals, yeah, you've got a lot more leeway, but again, try not to. We can run the risk, because we're passionate about our project and we want to say a lot. We can spend too much time talking about the problem and what we're going to do and our organization, and not really getting to the point, and then people can get lost along the way, and then we lose the opportunity of our proposal standing out amid other opportunities. I think we should think of a 20-page as being really the upper limit, and between like 9 and 12 pages as being a good length for a full proposal. There is a way to do everything in a short and succinct way. Use tables, don't use very big graphics that are going to use a lot of space, and just also be brief in your problem statement. So some overall tips that we want to understand the funders' requirements. As we've said, review your eligibility and align with their focus areas. Always use clear and concise language. Avoid jargon, technical terms, and allow things to be logical, and use words correctly. If we start with a paragraph and say therefore, then we need to look above to see what is the therefore. So if we must be cognizant of the words we use, because certain words are associated with logic, and with they mean that something follows something else. So if we start with therefore, then there should have been something that we said before that now results in what we are saying. So we just always look at whether our language is logical, and if that gets tricky, then just use, as I said before, media language is a very easy to understand style and tone, and we're all familiar with it. We see it every day. The language that's in newspapers, in the media, in articles online. It's very fresh and easy to understand, and one doesn't get confused. Remember to highlight your experience and expertise. Here you could consider specifically highlighting any specialist skills that your team has, why it makes them well suited to doing the work and getting the results. Showcase your achievements, what you've been able to do over the last few years, the milestones that you had, and demonstrate your ability, most importantly, to manage the money well and to get the work done in a timely way. Understand that you really have a good grasp of the problem. You didn't just imagine the problem, or you went by yourself and thought about the problem, but you didn't know that other people, very clever people that have dedicated their lives to something, have taken the time of day to actually say something and put a report or a research paper out there. So it's also about demonstrating humility, that we acknowledge that others, we stand on the shoulders of others, and others have done the work, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And that's the importance of, and the usefulness of using a report or some research that someone did. It saves you time. You don't have to go into depth about the problem. You can spend more time on your solution, and that's about you, and the proposal should be speaking to about what you want to do for the donor or funder or company to solve this problem. And we're also going to want to show the evidence that we have that we've been having some success. Be realistic. Again, remember our example of that 80% of youth fund jobs at the end of our training workshop. That was not a realistic target in my view. And we want to have realistic goals that we can meet, and that we don't want to set ourselves up for failure. We want to set ourselves up for success. And then we want to include the basics of our M&E plan, what we intend to measure. And this is going to help when it comes time to say that our solution is very innovative and our funders and donors love it. Then it's going to help us time when it comes to closing and contracting and initiating the project. And then just always remember to align the budget with all your proposed activities and indicators. So it's important that everything matches everything else, and that the different sections of your proposal, as we've discussed, the problem statement, the solution, the implementation plan, your methodology, your M&E plan, about your organization, your risks and strategies for mitigating those risks, everything speaks to one another, and at the very end, the budget speaks to it all in numbers. Here is an example for our skills program. I do apologize, I think we've reached the time, but I'm nearly at the end. And there are just two more slides, I believe. So this is a practical example of our Skills for Success program that we're looking at it over a 1-year time frame. Just to the hashes in the different columns. If there's 2 hashes, I should have put a note here because so that was a mistake on my part. So 2 hashes means that it was half the quarter. 4 hashes means that it's all of the quarter. And so this is an example of a Gantt diagram. I find this very helpful for just putting across at a very high level stage how you think the project will run. So remember, our project is to train youth so that they can become employed or self-employed. So we've got some program preparation in Q1. For the first 2 quarters in the 12 months, we recruit participants, and the delivery of the actual training happens only from Q2 onwards. You can see mentorship happens also sort of concurrently, but the 2 activities are a little bit focused, where it's first training and then mentorship follows training. So you see that indication of the half and the half on each one shows that you've thought about actually how you're going to do it, and it helps speak to the different activities in a logical way. Then the job placement happens at the end, and then M&E activities happen throughout, and that's how one would expect it to happen. Donor relationships. So I think we've spoken to a lot of these things. It's important to demonstrate your sustainability, what you're doing, engage with your existing donors, speak to them, find out how their priorities are changing. Perhaps they've had a recent strategy realignment and they are going to post new guidelines. Stay up to date with what foundations and donors are doing in terms of what they seek to support. And diversify, diversify, diversify. You always want to have many different supporters and sponsors of your work, because life is unpredictable, and it's good to have backing from multiple sponsors for your projects, so that ultimately you don't have any hiccups or delays or stoppages, and then that wastes a lot of time in terms of the work happening from a day-to-day basis. Explore government funding. Always check the different individual websites for their tender opportunities, understand what the mood of government is and where their priorities align in the current time period. You could consider fundraising campaigns. These require media and storytelling, and um, I would suggest that these are more useful if your work has an emotional dimension, or if there's an aspect um, of something that individuals can relate to, and that they feel they're compelled to support your project because it's a matter of a human being's dignity or a human being's overall well-being. If your project is not so related to such issues, you may want to focus on donor funds from organizations that issue calls for proposals, etc. We've spoken to a lot of these other aspects already. It's just reiterating. Uh, Always have personalized approaches. If you're reaching out on LinkedIn, for example, and you want to connect with someone, select the option to add a note, add a personalized note, and tell someone why you want to connect with them. Um, uh, and endeavor to grow your network of potential donors, and highlight what you want to do and why it's going to be important to them. Um, you may consider investing a particular resource within your organization into fundraising and proposal writing, as we spoke about at length when we looked at company documents. Transparency and accountability is always critical. We must always be honest and open and transparent, and stay connected. And that's why I thank you all for joining today. This is a part of staying connected and sharing knowledge within the sector. It doesn't do anything to a candle to light other candles. So we don't lose anything by sharing. Some further resources, as I've told you, check donor websites, organizations for their guidelines, their sustainability reports, and that's going to help you understand what they support. There's several useful websites. Um, some foundations like the Commonwealth Foundation and the EU, and very big ones like USAID, they also make certain things available that they might not entirely be relevant to the South African context, but they could give you some ideas about how to do your M&E, or just an understanding of what the mood out there is like in terms of what people think the big problems are. Um, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my favorite at the moment. There's a whole lot of influencers that are published regularly about how to be better in your fundraising, how you should be communicating your message. And so I encourage you to grow your LinkedIn network, even if it's not connections. Follow people and check it on a daily basis. Allocate some time in the morning or in the evening to just scroll through your feed and check what's been happening. So we did a Q&A session earlier, which was great. If you need to go, you may, if you want to stay, I think we can keep the webinar open for a few more minutes. But I hope you've enjoyed the session, and it's been my absolute pleasure to present on this topic that I'm very passionate about. Thank you. Then I'll just check the chat if we have any last questions. But yes, again, thank you for your time. Um, Yes, building, see a question in the chat. It's very important to build a portfolio of evidence to strengthen your ability to sell your projects. Um, thank you. I'm glad that you found it informative. Um, storytelling is very important, I would say. It's it's the way things are now. Everyone is about storytelling. You can see it in on social media. Um, we like stories, but humans have always liked stories. So um, storytelling is important. It doesn't have to be long. A story is just something with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a golden thread that runs through it. So that's what we mean by storytelling, that um, there's a theme that we follow from beginning to end. And when someone's finished reading it, they come away with a sense of they know the story. Just please fill out the evaluation form that my colleague has shared. It's really helpful for us to um, uh, work out how we can improve Seriti Partner offerings. And I really look forward to presenting next week's session, which will look into what do we count as evidence. And I hope that's going to be helpful for thinking about your M&E indicators. So thank you once again very much. I wish you all a good day.